All right guys, so I'm out here on the water today and we're going to be testing out the casting abilities of the new Curado 150 MGL. Now I have the reel mounted on the 6'8" medium Shimano BANTAM, which is a moderate fast taper. I got my 10-pound bulk fluoro, and check out this reel in the sunlight. We got some good sunlight today. It's finally cleared up from raining like the last week or so, but you can definitely see the green in this reel out here in the daylight, but it doesn't appear to be any greener than indoors under, I guess, fluorescent lights or indoor lights. But yeah, this is what the reel looks like out in the sun. And my objective today is to obviously check out the long bombing capabilities of this reel, but we're also going to see if this thing can handle a 1/8 ounce lure. And I'm also going to, I guess, see what the difference is with using all 6 brakes on this reel versus just 4 on, because if you remember, this reel has 6 brake arms for its SBS Infinity system. And hopefully, if the wind cooperates, I'm going to try to get some long distance drone shots just so you guys can see how far this reel is really casting, after I dial it in, of course. Now, of course, casting a reel on its own is kind of misleading because you don't have anything to compare it to. So I brought out the Curado 200K, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cast this reel around for a few minutes, get myself reacquainted with the 200K's casting abilities, and then I'm going to start casting the 150. So that should give me a good idea of the difference between the two, and hopefully the new 150 will be a more dynamic caster, given its much lighter spool and slightly smaller line capacity. So yeah, I am going to be using one lure for the distance casting. It is a Academy, I guess, top water lure. I weighed it on the scale. It weighs about 13 grams, so just under 1/2 ounce. So hopefully my 10-pound line will not break. So yeah, I'm gonna dial in this Curado 200K, get myself reacquainted before I move on to the 150. All right, so spool tension is going to be set up to just minimize the side-to-side play. What the hell? A ladybug just landed on my glasses. All right, there we go. So you can see it's a fast fall. We're going to start off with 4 brakes on inside. And I'm going to turn the dial all the way to 6 just so I can let the line settle before I start bombing these casts out. And immediately I remember how hard it is to turn the external dial onto 200K because it's so flush with the side plate. All right, here we go. All right, very smooth and quiet, just like I remember. I can't remember the last time I actually casted the 200K. This reel has been out for, what, about 3 years now? Came out in 2018. And who knows, maybe I can get a top water bite because I'm using mono. All right, I got some wind in my back. I'm gonna do a couple more casts to let this line settle. Looks like I'm getting about 30-35 yards with the brakes turned up to their maximum position. No hint of overrun. All right, I'm gonna dial these brakes down off camera and then let you guys see what the 200K can do. Okay guys, so I think I got the 200K dialed in. I had the internal brakes set to 2 and the external dial set to around 5. And in this setting, if I get a good cast where the lure comes off the rod the right way and travels straight through the air, I have no overruns. But if I guess it tumbles just a little, there is a little bit of overrun that kind of sorts itself out before the cast is over. And let me show you what the 200K can do. Now we got some wind coming in, I can feel it. Let's see if the 200K can handle it. I guess it couldn't, and I think the lure came off the rod wrong, but I'm gonna wait till this wind coming in dies down Now, surely I can turn the brakes up and deal with this wind, but it's not going to give us a really good indication of how far the 200K is casting out this topwater lure. And one thing I can tell you is that just after one time trying to work this walking topwater across the water, my wrists are burning. Of course, this is not the lightest, most responsive rod either. It's the Shimano Convergence 6'8", medium heavy fast. But once again, the weight and I guess the bulky profile or the bulky side plate of the 200K makes me never ever want to use this reel for walking topwater or suspending jerk baits. So I'm gonna wait till this wind settles down and I'll show you what the 200K could do. All right, I think the wind's died down sufficiently. Let's start casting. Okay, so hopefully you guys have been seeing where this lure is landing for the 200K. I would say it's going out there probably about 45, maybe close to 50 yards sometimes. But one thing that I do remember now is that the thumb bar on the 200K, when it gets wet, it does get slick, and I pretty much after every cast have to wipe it clean so my thumb doesn't slip off. So let's get to the 150. Okay, so it's MGL 150 time, and if you remember in the unboxing video, Shimano shipped this reel with 3 brakes on, 3 brakes off, and number 4 on the external dial. So we're going to start there, and I'm going to do a few casts just to let the line settle, and here we go. Oh damn. Okay, so I just barely flicked that out there right off the bat. The 150 MGL spool is noticeably faster than the 200K, and I wasn't really putting any effort into that cast. It is a little bit louder as well, but it's definitely more exciting. All right, let's try to walk this thing. Oh yeah. I would definitely use this reel for walking topwater. It palms much better, fits in my hand better. It is so much lighter. So easy to make this lure dance across the water. All right, one more cast. We'll do overhead. Okay, fellas, so right there, just a flick of my wrist on an overhead cast, looks like we are already matching the distance on a lot of the 200K's casts. Now the brakes do make noticeably more noise. You can hear it buzzing, and you can kind of feel it as well. The 200K was a smooth caster. With this new 150, it looks like you're going to have more sensations coming through the frame. All right, so just on those flicks, I did see some loops forming that sorted itself out, but I just forgot. I forgot to set my spool tension. And yeah, there's quite a bit of side-to-side play on the spool tension. Probably why I saw those couple of loops. So I'm gonna definitely tighten this up. Okay, Now with the spool tension on the 150, once again, it's a tad bit hard to turn, at least on my reel. So just getting that right balance of moving the side to side play and not tightening it too much seems a little tricky. Okay, I think I got it there. All right, right there, that should be good enough. Okay, let's start casting. Okay, so immediately we are equaling the distance of the 200K, tightening the spool tension to eliminate that side-to-side movement. Definitely cured those 1 or 2 loops I saw. And let's turn these brakes down, see how low we can go on the external dial. Okay, we're gonna go down to 3. So 3 brakes on inside, 3 off, 3 on the external dial. All right, so yeah, no issues with the spool going down to 3. Distance was at least equaling the best cast of the 200K, and I feel we can go down even more. Let's go down to number 2. Okay, so we had a nice overrun there. Definitely slowed the spool down, but it worked itself out. So it looks like 2 was too low on the external dial. So what I'm gonna do now is off camera, I'm gonna try to dial this thing in for maximum casting and then show you guys the results. All right, so I believe I've dialed in this 150 to the optimum brake setting. I have 2 brakes on inside, 4 brakes off. External dial is on 4. And let me show you what this MGL 150 can do with this 13-gram top water. So right there, I'd estimate it was going probably close to 50 yards. And the good news is not once have I had to wipe the thumb bar clean of water. The grip on this thumb bar is excellent, even when wet. Here we go. So it is not significantly farther than the 200K. I would say probably an extra 5 to 8 foot, maybe an extra 10 foot on a good cast. I'm gonna try to dial the external dial down to 3.5, see if we can extract a little bit more distance here. And once again, it's gonna depend on how the lure comes off the rod, because if it tumbles even a little, that will result in overrun. All right, that was more of a line drive cast. Had a small overrun there, but it was noticeably short, and that was my fault. So if any of you guys are wondering why your reel can be inconsistent with topwater, it's all in the way the lure comes off the rod. If it comes off the rod wrong and it tumbles, then you can have spool blowups. All right, let's try again. Okay, so going to 3.5 results in overruns that are cutting the distance down, slowing the spool down. So I'm gonna go back to 4. Now these Academy topwater lures don't seem to cast quite as good as some other topwater lures that I've had. Now I know that they have the weights at the very back of the lure like with others, but for some reason, in my opinion, I seem to get better distance with other brands of topwaters. All right, so once again, not significantly farther than the distance on the 200K. On good casts, you will probably see an extra 10 foot. So the question is, did I really gain any distance going from 3 brakes on inside to 2 brakes on? And it looks like I'm really not. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go back to 3 brakes on, keep it symmetrical for you OCD knuckleheads, and let's see if we can get any better distance this way. No, it was definitely cut down by a good at least 10 to 12 foot. So I'm gonna turn the dial externally down to 3. All right, so yeah, it's kind of a conundrum there. More brakes on inside, but less external dial seems to equal less brakes on inside, more on the external dial. So what that tells us is that this external dial on these later Shimano SPS Infinity brakes definitely contribute to distance more than the previous SPS Infinity. And what I mean by previous, talking reels like the CHRONARCH CI14, the 200i Curado, the ALDEBARAN 50 2015 version. Those brakes were better for fine-tuning small adjustments when it came to the external dial. All right, a few more casts. I'm gonna try to go down to 2.5 because the spool seemed pretty controlled right there. All right, that was a nice rainbow cast that didn't really go that far despite being in the air for so long. Okay, had a little overrun, so we're gonna go to let's say 2.75. Wow, had even more overrun. So we're going back to 3. I think that's probably the lowest we can get. All right, so far, what I've noticed with this new 150 is that it casts the average top water a little bit farther than the 200K. The spool is definitely faster, more exciting. The brakes are definitely a little bit louder. You can definitely feel the brakes humming through the frame, but the ergonomics, the palming, the weight, and especially the thumb bar are so much better than the 200K. And I still have plenty of line left on this reel. So there is no issue of potentially casting all the line off of the spool like with the 70. Okay, so I can feel a strong headwind coming into me. So let's see how these brakes cope with that. Okay, had a little bit of overrun there. Lure didn't travel that far, but pretty good. Coped with it pretty good. Let's do some sidearm. Now, one thing I will definitely give to the 200K, the retrieve on that reel is so buttery smooth. It is definitely smoother than this MGL 150. As I said in the unboxing video, the main gear on this reel may need some more grease, but it is still very smooth. Okay, a couple more. Now, I tend to think we're gonna see more separation between these two. We were gonna drop down the lure weight to under 1/2 of an ounce, but we'll find out on the casting field. So yeah, this is definitely a reel I would use for walking topwater. Okay guys, so instead of using the topwater lure for the drone footage, I'm going to be using a 1/2 ounce casting plug, weighs a little bit over 14 grams, just to give you guys a little bit more excitement with this casting demonstration. And let's just do one cast from the GoPro footage. Now, I've turned 2 brakes on inside, external dial set to about 1.25. And hopefully you guys can see where this casting plug is landing. But it's going out there probably at least 60 to 65 yards, maybe even more. Once again, I'm kind of bad at estimating these distances, but we'll do one more and then we will try to take the drone up and let you guys estimate for yourselves. Here we go. Okay, maybe we'll do one more because that landed kind of off to the right. Not sure if you guys saw it. Okay. Okay guys, so as you can see, I've switched spots and it's time to test out the low range or the light lure capability of the 150 MGL. Of course, I got the same rod, same line on, and we're just gonna go straight down to it, and we're gonna use a little jerk bait, some kind of a knockoff that I bought off AliExpress. It weighs like 3.6 or 3.7 grams on the scale, so a little bit over 1/8 of an ounce. And of course the snap swivel will probably add about 0.2 of a gram onto that. But yeah, this is the same rod and line that I've used to test several other reels like the METANIUM, the ANTARES, the 2020 TATULA SV, and all those reels really impressed me with the way they can cast really light lures with, you know, line and a rod that really is not suited for such light baits. So let's see if the 150 can do the same thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn these brakes up to 4 inside, and we have the external dial. Let's turn it all the way up to 6 just to play it safe for the first few casts. All right, here we go. All right, that was pretty impressive. I just kind of lobbed it out there, but it went out there probably at least 45 foot. Spool, very controlled. Now luckily this combo is light enough for me to cast one-handed. I'm gonna move over here so I don't hit the tree on my backswing, and let's start putting some effort into these casts now. Okay, wow. So that went out there probably at least 20 yards. Spool still very controlled. And I'm whipping it out there. Now it is kind of going off to the left, so I'm gonna start backing the external dial down. Let's go to 4. Maybe that'll improve how straight this lure will go. Okay, much better. Spool still controlled. Let's go to 3 on the external dial. Okay, so that was much straighter, and we're looking at least 20 yards, maybe 22 or 23. So man, this thing can definitely do upper end bait finesse without even breaking a sweat. Let's do some overhead. All right, maybe got a few feet farther. Spool still unfazed. I'm gonna say, just from my memory, this feels like it can outdo even the mighty 2020 METANIUM when it comes to this light lure. And it's probably due in part to the fact that the spool is smaller, 32 millimeters, remember, while the METANIUM has a 34 millimeter spool. Okay, so off camera, I'm gonna try to back these brakes down as low as they'll go. Okay, so quick update. I had to take the snap swivel off because it was fouling in the hooks too much, but I was able to take the MGL 150 down to 2 brakes on inside, 6 on the external dial, but we are literally right on the edge. So you really have to monitor the spool and have your thumb ready. But let me show you what it can do now. That's going out there at least 25 yards, if not more. Let's do a few more. Now I am thumbing the spool pretty much throughout the cast, but very impressive on the distance you can get with this reel with the 1/8 ounce lure. And it's not even breaking a sweat. Feels like it can go lower, but we're not really gonna test that out. This is not a bait finesse reel, but you can definitely do upper end bait finesse with no problem. And just imagine what you can do with a BFS rod and some 4 or 6 pound line on this thing. A few more casts. Now, fortunately, where I'm at now does not allow drones because I am near a dam, and for some reason they don't want people flying drones near dams, so I can't get you guys any drone footage. But man, that is whipping this little lure out there, probably at least 80 feet, maybe even longer than that. Once again, it kind of makes you wonder, what do you need that MGL 70 for if this reel can handle light lures like this? Oh, had an overrun, cleared itself out. Now, if you wanted to cast this overrun free, we can probably turn one brake on and go to 3 brakes on inside. Probably go down to maybe 4 on the external dial. Yeah, distance was roughly the same, but I didn't have to thumb the spool except for when the lure hit the water. Oh, had a little blow up there. So let's go to 4.5. Wow, did I go to 4.5 or 3.5? Okay, so I've turned the external dial up to 5. Wow, that's crazy. I have 3 brakes on. Okay, I think I know what's going on. I had some pretty bad blow-ups, and there are some definite kinks in the line that are causing overruns, but it doesn't diminish how far this MGL 150 is casting this tiny little, what I would consider a trout lure. So once again, slap this reel on a dedicated BFS rod, throw some 6-pound line on it, and you can definitely bait finesse on the upper end with no problem. All right, one more cast. Let's try an overhead. Very, very impressive casting range on the MGL 150. The 200K definitely struggled with a 1/8 ounce lure. Okay guys, so I am back from out on the water, casting around and testing the new Curado MGL 150. And let's go over my thoughts and observations. Okay, so let's talk about the casting distance of this reel. And of course I brought out the mighty 200K as a comparison, and I only brought out one lure to cast, and that was this topwater lure that I got from, I guess, Academy, and it weighs just under 1/2 of an ounce, so not too heavy. Now in my opinion, the 150 was outcasting the 200 by probably almost 10 feet on really good casts, and then probably 5 foot or less on all the other casts. Now that's not a knock on the 150, that just shows us just how awesome the 200K is and why this reel is continually on Tackle Warehouse's bestseller list. Now, in my opinion, if we would have went to a heavier topwater, let's say 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce, I think that the 200K would probably eke out longer cast distances, and that's because it does have the bigger spool at 34 millimeters, while the MGL once again has a 32 millimeter spool. Now I will say this though, the MGL takes less effort to cast long distances than the 200K, and that's due to that lighter MGL spool. Now if Shimano would have kept the spool of the 150 at 34 millimeters like the K, but still made it super light, that might have been a whole different story. But you'd be creeping close to 2020 METANIUM MGL specs if you did that. So I understand why Shimano shrunk the spool size down. They didn't want this $199 reel casting as good as their $420 reel. So now let's talk about where the MGL 150 just dominates the 200K, and that is with light baits. Now this was the little lure that I was casting, and I did not cast the 200K with this lure, but what I can tell you is that a couple of years ago I did a big 1/8 ounce lure shootout where the 200K went up against several other reels using 6-pound mono and an appropriate bait finesse rod, and even then the 200K struggled with such a light lure. It was hitting somewhere around 70 feet I think, but the lure would constantly go off to the left. The accuracy was awful. That's due to the big heavy spool. Now with the MGL 150, hopefully you guys saw, but it was handling this really light jerk bait almost too easily. I would estimate that it was probably hitting around 80 feet once I dialed the brakes down, and the accuracy was excellent. And keep in mind, this was with 10-pound mono and a medium powered rod. So just imagine what it could do with some 4 or 6-pound line on a dedicated BFS rod. And we may have to test that out one day. And I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say that I think that this MGL 150 probably can handle lighter lures slightly better than even the mighty 2020 METANIUM due to the smaller diameter spool. And I know that's a pretty bold statement, but from what I remembered testing out the METANIUM on the same rod, using the same line, casting a similar weight lure, it didn't feel quite as easy as this MGL 150. Alright, so now let's talk about where I feel the 150 is better and worse than the 200K. Now obviously the first thing is the light lure castability of the 150 is levels over the 200K, and I feel that this thing will outcast the 200K slightly with lures up to 1/2 of an ounce, maybe up to 5/8 of an ounce. But more than that, the spool on the 150 is way faster, way more exciting, and way more dynamic than the 200K, which is probably Shimano's tamest reel out of its current lineup. So it's one of these Shimano reels that you make a cast and this spool will spin up so fast that you think it's gonna backlash, but it doesn't. So it's definitely a more exciting reel to fish overall. You just really have to flick your wrist and you can send a lure flying a long way. Now obviously, as you guys saw, I was trying to work that top water bait, and I wasn't even, doing a fast cadence, but with the 200K, my wrist was wore out after only a few seconds. Now granted, I was using different weight rods, but I don't think that really would have made that much of a difference walking that top water bait with the 200K. Now with this 150, since it weighs over an ounce less and it's much lower profile and compact, at least on the side plate region, walking that top water bait was a breeze. That's something that I could definitely do for an extended period of time with the 150. So in my opinion, vastly superior ergonomics, and that especially includes the thumb bar. Now with that 200K, after every cast I literally had to wipe down the thumb bar to remove the water, but with this 150, even though the thumb bar got wet, my thumb would not slip off of it. So yeah, far superior thumb bar, and I wish they would have made the thumb bar a little bit bigger, giving it more real estate, but it is still far superior to the thumb bar on that 200K. Now as far as what is better on the 200K, I think there's really only one thing, and that is it is noticeably smoother than this 150 in retrieving and casting. Of course, with the 150 being a lighter reel, you're definitely going to feel more vibrations coming through it, and you can definitely tell going from this reel to the 200K, you'll feel the brakes humming a little bit more on the 150 versus the 200. And the 200 was a slightly quieter caster as well, but when it came to retrieving, the 200K is definitely a level above this MGL 150. It's just a buttery smooth cranking experience with the 200K. And once again, I think I probably need some grease on this main gear, but yeah, there's a noticeable difference going from one to the other, and the 150, at least my reel, is not as smooth as the 200. So there we go guys, my initial impressions on this MGL 150 is just as I suspected. It pretty much eliminated the two weaknesses that the 200K had, which is light lure capabilities and ergonomics. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 150, the 200K, and the 70 out to the casting field, and we're going to get some actual measurements, casting heavy and light casting plugs. But that's not probably going to come out for another couple of weeks. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helped you out in your decision on this MGL 150. I think it's a no-brainer when it comes to probably being the best all-around casting Curado to date. Alright guys, thanks a lot.